Yo, what's going on YouTube? Schmeck here. And in today's video, we are going to be covering some of the meta builds specifically for DPS. We will not be covering support builds today. And we're going to kind of tailor these to the Isle of Night, but more specifically raids and also general endgame PvE content. I'm going to be staying away from catacombs a little bit, but yeah. First thing I want to start with is that this season we have so many new options with weapon combinations, perk combinations, set bonuses, all that stuff, to the point where anyone saying that there's like a full BIS build out there is just, not going to be 100% sure what they're talking about yet. The main reason I'm releasing this video is because I finally think that I got my Rapier build somewhere where I think it's legitimate enough that it will stand the test of time. However, there's going to be so many new cooks that are going to come up. Now, on top of that, there might even be new weapon combinations and new builds that become, part of the DPS meta as we progress, continue to test things, and learn more. So the big thing here is I really want you guys to just test your own stuff going forward. And in today's video, we're going to kind of cover a few things about the DPS meta as a whole, how you can step away from Rapiers a little bit if you no longer want to do that. But we are going to talk about why Rapier is so strong and go over some of the Rapier basics. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Now, first thing we're going to talk about today is that Season 7, 8, and 9 was massive on the Rapier meta. I know a lot of people were incredibly frustrated with the fact that it seemed like every Gorgon had all of these Rapiers all the time, it's the only build people wanted, and so on. So I kind of wanted to cover like a pretty cool topic here. And to do that, we're going to use a group from EU, speedrun group that ended up setting a very phenomenal time in the Hive of Gorgons raid. And these guys are called the Ninjas. Hell yeah. I'm sure you guys can see them on EU, or if you're familiar with speedrunning, you probably know about them. But the first thing I want to cover is that they were not using a ton of Rapiers in their comp, right? And regardless of whether or not you think using Rapiers is viable, and these guys are just not doing the right thing, the main point is that they were still able to get a phenomenal kill of 1 minute and 25 seconds or so with the comp that they're using. And this is really to show you that it's not always about Rapiers, it's about the team comp, and it's also about your ability to build your own build accordingly so that you're optimizing your own damage, and you're also, practicing so that you can figure out the best rotation of your auto attacks and abilities in order to be successful. Now, this is Kita's VOD we're watching right here, and he is a great example of this. One thing that you can see him doing is he always tries to do light attacks, and Hatchet has a 4th light attack at the end of a chain, but it really is a long animation you don't want to get locked into. So what is he doing? Basically, you can see that he's trying to cancel every 3rd light attack with an ability, whether it's a throwing hatchet or it's berserk, right? And that's one thing that he's doing. On top of min-maxing his build, he's also min-maxing his playstyle to do as much damage as possible. Really cool VOD. Now, these guys were using like 2 hatchets, some flex DPS, and I think that they only had like 2 or 3 rapiers, right? Now, we can watch another perspective, right, which is Odlin, who was the Blunderbuss Firestaff player. And again, not a rapier build, right? And still, they're getting a sub 1 minute, 30-second kill. Super cool. I don't know a lot about BB, okay? So I'm gonna straight up tell you. The first thing I can say is that because this build relies so heavily on dot damage, you're probably only gonna want 1 blunderbuss in your entire comp. Otherwise, you're gonna be losing a ton of damage. And regardless of how the build's set up, one thing that you can do is always try and cancel your auto attacks with abilities. That way you're kind of min-maxing your uptime, right? And you can kind of see how he's doing that here. I'll be linking all of these VODs in the description, so if you guys want to go back and watch them, you're more than welcome to. And then again, here's just a look at Reaper's VOD, who's doing something very similar with Hatchet, right? This is kind of just like we saw Kita do. But again, a group that is getting sub 1 minute, 30-second kills on Echidna is not stacking 5, 6, 7 rapiers. They have a unique composition with a few hatchets, maybe a greatsword, and a firestaff player, right? With the blunderbuss. So really cool. Now, again, I'll link these. If you guys want to go back and watch them, go ahead. This section here is mainly to talk about the fact that it's not always just about copy and pasting what you see other people do, but instead it's about you putting in the effort to think about your own build, the perk combinations, your stats, the rotations for your abilities and your auto attacks, and all those other things that go into making you do the most damage you can. If you don't put in that effort, right, you're never going to get out of what other people tell you to do. So this season has so many combinations, like I said in our little introduction. And if any season was a season to kind of break away from the meta, this would basically be one of those seasons. Now, kind of a cool concept build that I've done myself. And this is just really to show you guys the possibilities, right, of what you can do. So again, I've cooked up, we did this with chat actually on stream, right? And again, this set is not optimized in any way, so don't really look at the damage here. All you're really looking at is the rotations. But you can do something pretty unique where I'm doing like a Greatsword Dorgort's Blade build. And if you look at Dorgort's right now, once you apply 3 bleeds, you can use an ability to actually consume those bleeds and then do a ton of damage. The cool thing too is that Moonstone will actually work for you in this build, and I'll kind of showcase a rotation right now. Let's say you go in, you do your heavies, and then you can use Rupture, or you could use Skyward to actually proc your bleed. Now, if you look at my ability bar, we're basically going to have our abilities up, or our Moonstone up permanently, and our abilities are always on a perfect rotation. And we are popping these big burn stacks, which could potentially actually be incredibly good damage, right? So I kind of have cooked up like 2 rotations, and I've added both of these into a spreadsheet that I will link in the description, and that's just going to be covering some builds. So again, here's one combination that you could do with Rupture because of how strong it is, and another combination you could do is with Skyward, so that this you're applying Rend, and you're going to be staying in Onslaught stance to do even more damage. Now, do I think that this build is freaking crazy? I don't know yet. We got to test it. But the point is, I'm trying to show you guys what you have to do to think about all those little things to create a build to rival some of the better DPS builds in the game, right? So now that we've covered all of that, we are going to go into our Rapier stuff. And first thing we're going to do here is I will just showcase a Rapier build that I have finally put together that I think is actually going to be a long-standing meta for quite a little bit of time. So first thing we're going to do is I'm going to showcase the build, and then we're going to break down some Rapier basics and talk about some of the possible Rapier metas that might come out of, you know, further exploration, a little bit more testing, all that nonsense. So without further ado, here's the build I'm currently rocking. I have the old Leeching Flurry on the head. I have Omni Evade, Leeching Flurry on my gloves. And then I'm actually using 2 of the Ele Charge Set. And I'm going to explain this in a second, but I basically think that this set is hard bis. And I'm using the Gray Vessel Shoes for my second part. I really wanted to stay away from Amulet and Earring for set bonuses because I'm probably going to be changing these things out quite often, but I'm not 100% sure about that yet. Big thing is, I think that the Spectral Wrath Ring, at least for raids, or anything that's not M3s, is probably going to be by far the best ring that you can get. I'm not 100% sure about this in the future, because if you do get rings with really good perks, Unscathed Empowerment actually has a massive negative, which is removing the you'll increase the instance of damage you take by 14%, and that actually might not be worth the Empower trade-off, but Enraged Leech is so strong right now that I'm almost willing to risk it. I think a little bit more testing could be done here, but I think that this is a really solid ring from the first boss of Jester right now. Now, the other thing that I will talk about is actually, here, we'll show this real quick for the people that just want to get through it. Vicious, Keenly Empowered Rogue on Inferno. This is going to be really important with the set bonus. And then, of course, I'm using an old Gorgonite Rapier, but you do not need to use this. A few other really good Rapier options right now are the Elementally Charged Rapier from the Catacombs faction shop, or the Catacombs shop, I guess. And then the other option is just going to be a Thwarting Strikes, Gem Slot, Skill Slot Rapier with maybe N2, skill slot, offensive slots, yada yada. The only other rapier that I really wanted to bring up right now is called Pokey, which is basically the rapier that I'm currently running. This actually drops from a mob called Vanash, which I will show you guys on screen right here. So this is in the Tribunal High Mounds Elite area. Vanash is super easy to kill. You'll always find like 1 or 2 people there to help you guys. And you can basically get the Pokey Rapier from here. And this one is really solid. So I'll link this as well. But you could throw Disdained Infliction on here. And this is basically the rapier that I am using right now, as you can see. So last thing before we kind of get into the rotations is I want to talk a little bit about Stopping Powered and Power Shot right now. So these are musket abilities, right? You guys are probably like, Schmeck, why are you fucking rocking those on your rapier set? Well, Power Shot and Stopping Power work on everybody. It is a global buff. So if we read this, we can see that I will do 12% increased base damage to targets that are inflicted with Stopping Power's slower exhaust debuffs. So let's say my buddy Zuko over here with the BB, he does a Stopping Powered or a Power Shot on this dummy right here. Power Shot is the same thing, same exact concept. If he does that, I don't even need to use Musket or anything. I just have to have these perks on my armor, and I'm basically going to get a damage increase. So these 2 perks alone, 12% and 6% basically, are giving me an 18% base damage increase as long as those debuffs are up on a boss. And both of them can be applied to bosses. We have tested this. So if you guys want to min-max your damage a little bit, right, with your comps right now, you could have a musket player. You could have someone offhand a musket and then extend these debuffs permanently. A lot of unlimited options here. So let's actually go into some basic rapier rotations now. Now, obviously, this is kind of my standard rotation here. And I'll go a little bit slower so that you guys can see. But I really like doing 2 evades. And then when my evade is on half its cooldown, I like to flurry. And that's my standard rotation right there. Now you guys are probably wondering, what's up with the Ele Charge Set? Well, if we read it, if I'm in combat and I activate a magic ability, when I activate a non-magical ability after that, I will consume the charge that I created from my Fire Staff and add that to weapon damage, all right? Now, this weapon damage is insane. It's basically like an attunement with almost no activation cooldown. And I'll show you guys what it looks like right now. So you can basically see that every hit I'm doing right now is getting a 400 to 500 damage increase from fire. Now, when it wears out, all you do is swap back, and you go back and continue doing the same thing again. So this is one of the reasons why I think the Ele Charge Set is going to be so strong right now. The synergy with Rapier is crazy, and if you look at some of the possibilities that you can do with this setup, you're going to be doing an insane amount of damage. You're basically tacking on an additional 500 damage to almost every hit in your standard rotation. Now, to top it off, these pieces actually aren't even that bad. You can see that I have Enchanted Ward, Sacrificial Empowerment, and 2 infixes that give me a little bit of value. I think Elementally Energized is actually pretty solid, because if you do end up swapping, you're going to have pretty high stamina regen rate for almost the entire fight. And again, if you're fighting something like Jester, which is what my set currently is specifically for, Strike Conditioning is aight, right? Thrust Conditioning is really not that good. I think Elemental Rush is a little bit of a bait, but I am trying it out right now to figure out if I think it's good. I don't really like consuming stamina because it might mess up my stamina usage and I could Grey Bar myself and then die, but that probably won't happen, right? So, once again, here's the build real quick for you guys. And I have some old food on right now, but here are my normal stats. And with the best food, I go up to 398 dex. And then here is my standard evade tree that I like to run. So let's go into a few kind of frequently asked questions and topics to go over, right? Now, the first one is that it's important for you guys to know that, again, we are only covering DPS builds here today. And what I mean by that is that with DPS builds, we are practically useless. We offer no utility to the entire raid. And what I mean by that is that other builds are going to offer things like healing, fortify, empower, rend, and weaken. But as a rapier player, you don't do any of that. And even the other builds that I covered earlier, right? Like a hatchet player, maybe a firestaff BB player. You guys are borderline useless in the sense that all you do is damage. So when you're thinking about raid comps, I know it's fun to run the rapier builds, but you also want to be thinking about making sure you're covering your other bases before you start utilizing only damage builds. Next kind of category we're going to go into is, why is rapier so strong and why has it been in the meta for so long? So for a second here, let's completely get out of the damage argument, okay? We don't want to talk about damage at all right now. Damage is irrelevant. The main thing is that rapier has so much uptime on something like flurry. And what you can see is that every time that I flurry, I have grit, right? And grit is absolutely insane to be able to ego attacks and continue damaging through them. On top of that, you have something like riposte, which is another iframe, and it gives you additional CDR. So when you think about a standard rotation with rapier, most of the time you're going to have iframes from things like flurry and riposte and grit. Now, when you have all of those things too, you're also going to be getting an insane amount of healing, especially if you're stacking both leeching flurries, like you're seeing here. The main thing to note here is that rapier got a massive buff. It was already arguably one of the best weapons to use to survive with, even if we're not considering damage. And then rapier got something added to it called Leeching Flurry 2. Now, if we read this, we can see that flurry gives us 27 absorption for 4 seconds whenever we use it. And if you guys aren't familiar with absorption, absorption is basically gems and protection. So if we think about the percentage value here, right? And if at 800 gear score, this absorption goes up to 30% on flurry usage, that's basically like running strike protection on my amulet. And then if you do 4 times 5 for 5 jaspers for another 20%, add that on to strike protection 2 to get your 30%. 5 jaspers and a strike and a protection 2 on your amulet is basically going to give you the exact amount of absorption that Leeching Flurry on your weapon is going to give. So before this update, Flurry was already incredibly strong as probably one of the best survivable builds, and now it arguably got even stronger by having additional absorption, which basically makes you significantly tankier and will also reduce your chances greatly of not dying. And that's a massive thing. So again, right, you guys are seeing this every time that I'm activating my flurry. I'm getting 30% absorption tacked onto whatever gems I currently have. I get iframes, grit, and if I ever need an additional iframe, I have my riposte. And this basically allows you to play very aggressive and more or less ignore mechanics. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but hey, it allows you to do it. So let's move on to the next thing, right? And that is how bleeds work. So the way that bleeds work has been a massively kind of contested point for quite a while. And I actually got a cool little clip to show you guys. So big thing here is that rapier bleeds will stack up to 3 times. And after stacking or even applying them, you're going to use Flourish and Finish to consume them. The most important thing to note here is that whoever applies the rapier bleeds, that aspect of this, coordination is irrelevant. Anytime somebody FNFs, they can pop any rapier bleed applied by anybody, specifically through Flurry or Tondo. And just as an example, I have a little clip for you guys here. You guys will see that I will Flurry 3 times, right? And then what we'll do is we'll have Takate use FNF here, and he's going to pop my bleeds, And you can see that those numbers will show up on my screen as my bleeds being popped right here. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is because I don't know if a lot of people have fully understood how this synergy works. But if you think about the fact that you could have 3 or 4 rapiers all applying bleeds as fast as possible via flurry, and then you have someone spamming FNF with their standard rotation, this would basically, going off these numbers here, give us about 30k damage every second or two, right? Maybe up to 3 seconds, depending on however fast your FNF player can FNF. But this is one of the reasons why Rapier synergy has been so phenomenal over the years. And to give you guys one other example, right? I can show you a little bit of a video just for the final boss of Savage Divide that we did quite a while ago. But I kind of wanted to show you guys how much damage, stuff like FNF actually does. And this will be a really good example here, right? But you guys can see that I'm FNFing right here. Oh, it didn't actually pop up. Let's wait until the next one, right here probably. But you guys can see that I'm basically getting 2 bleed pops here for 13k. And then my other Rapier, Chia, he has his own flurry bleed applied. So I'm popping 2 bleeds, and his 3rd bleed is also being popped on his screen. Now, if you add up the math and how long it took me to do that rotation, right? That's basically a 45k bleed pop between 850 on my timer and right now. So this basically means that every 5 seconds or so, we are basically popping our bleeds for about 45k damage on this boss. And if we even take into account that I could have done an FNF faster if we had another Rapier, that could be 45k damage every 3 or even 4 seconds. And this is one of the reasons why Rapier bleeds have been so incredibly strong. Now, Tondo and FNF bleeds are exactly the same. So if you guys are ever wondering about Keen Tondo works in a way where you will actually get value from Keen Tondo even if a flurry bleed is applied. So again, Tondo and flurry bleeds are identical. And then all you do is you use FNF to pop them. Big damage, easy game. A few things to really go into, or I guess let's talk about Tondo for just a second, right? Basically, I think Tondo is bad. And one of the reasons that Tondo is bad is if we go over to New World Buddy, and this is especially if you're stacking like a lot of Rapiers, is basically because flurry or bleeds in general have a activation cooldown, right? So if we go down here and we look at Finalize, which is the flurry bleed, we can basically see that there is a global activation cooldown of 0.5 seconds. So what does this mean? This means that any bleed that is being applied from whoever, if me and 3 other Rapiers all flurried at the same exact time, only one of those flurry bleeds will be applied, because you have to wait 0.5 seconds as a global cooldown per mob that you're applying the bleed to for another bleed to actually work. So why does this make Tondo shit? Well, imagine if you're in a raid and you have anywhere from 3 to 4 Rapiers. Anytime you Tondo and you hit a Tondo within a 0.5 second window of anybody else applying a flurry bleed, Tondo's basically just not going to apply a bleed, right? And that makes Tondo really bad, because if it's not applying a bleed, it's basically useless. And that's kind of why the evade FNF build has been so freaking meta recently, and why Tondo has really fallen out of the meta. Now again, big question for you guys is always, why are people using Keen Tondo on your armor? Or Schmeck, why are you using Keen Tondo on your weapon? And again, this is because if a flurry bleed is applied, I will still get the value from Keen Tondo. That's a big one. So let's go into kind of the last 2 main questions. A lot of people are always saying, why Nimble Coat? And the big reason why you want Nimble Coat is basically for rotations. And this is going to be a little bit difficult to actually get into. And this is where I'm actually loving this season, right? Because I don't honestly know if Nimble Coat is going to be the meta anymore. I'm definitely leaning towards Nimble Coat being incredibly strong. But the main thing is that I have 25 focus right now, and maybe you could get rid of 25 focus. Maybe you could run the insurmountable earring. Maybe you could use more old hoplite pieces to get more refreshing. And there are so many ways that you can get refreshing now that there's so many build cooks to, you know, potentially talk about, discuss, test in game. One of the ones that I've thought is really cool is the Enrage piece set. Where if you guys read this piece here, which is from Dahoot, you basically get additional CDR every time you're consuming 3 stacks while you're at 15 stacks of Enrage. And if you haven't tried this yet, it's pretty freaking good. So the whole Nimble coat discussion is really going to come down to a CDR discussion, right? Again, I'm going to show you guys super quick. This is basically the standard rotation that I like to do the most right here. And my goal for you guys would be to say that this is the rotation that you really want to get down. So one way or another, this is the rotation that you really want to get down. And if you feel like you can't do that with whatever build you're using, then you need to maybe change or adjust if you're using 25 focus, if you're using more refreshing, if you have Nimble coat, right? And those are big things to think about. The main thing, again, with this is that if you look at my rotation, I want to be able to evade out of flurry as fast as I possibly can. And if you guys are having, or if you look at your own build and you're like, hey, Schmeck, I can't do my rotations as fast as you. What's up with that? Then maybe you need to reconsider how much refreshing you're using and all that jazz. Last thing we'll probably cover is skill trees. So again, this is the standard evade tree that I like. I'm not really a fan of the other artifacts that I've seen, like Cocoon leather pants or wing leather shoes. I think all of those are baseless cooks, and at the end of the day, you guys are all going to come back to Nimble coat eventually, especially with how easy it is to get now. And then here is the standard, should be this one, right? Yep. Here is going to be your standard F&F tree. I do think that there's a little bit of a room to cook, maybe with Adagio and Unerring. I think you could maybe drop and do something like this, but I personally prefer Adagio. Then just to round out the video, right, I'll just show you guys the OG combo. Are we ready to clip it? Here we go. Combat, pump. Hey, this guy had Rapier Bleeds applied, so mine didn't work. GG, we go next. All right, thank you for watching. If you guys have questions, let me know. I really hope that all of you cook up your own builds. Have fun with Season 10. Join the Discord if you guys want. We can cook up builds together. And I appreciate you all watching the vid. Pele, pele, pele.